Morning, everybody. Still writing the script. Happy first day of the general election news agendas. Woohoo! And welcome back to the news agenda. Me, Fleet Street Fox. And today I'm joined by my fellow Mirror columnist, Darren Lewis. Morning, Darren.
Morning. I see the rain has come. Just you say that it's the first of these since the general election was announced. And of course, Sunak announced it in the rain, and the rain's come back for hours as well. So
exactly. Right. Yeah. The weather gods heard that we weren't here a fortnight ago, and so thought, well, better go and do it now. We took a fortnight off over half term. Rishi Sunak went and called an election. Two bits of luck there. My bet with Paddy Power came in at 9-1. And also, I missed 14 days of the most pointless and boring election ever. Now, that's good. All good so far. But this, of course, is the People's Paper Review. So get into the comments, ask us your questions. We'll do our best to answer them for you. Those of you listening later on podcast will just have to wonder if, having taken a fortnight off, we are any the less jaded and bored of this already as you are. So what have we got for you today? Well, the Mirror has splashed on the discovery yesterday of the body of TV doctor Michael Mosley, just yards from safety on the Greek island of Symi. Now, we'll get on to the election in a bit, but first I just want to recap a bit on this because Dr. Mosley, it's fair to say, was a bit of a fixture in a lot of living rooms, wasn't he, Darren? And I suppose that makes his sudden death, really matter to a lot of people.
Absolutely, it does. I mean, he was a TV doctor, much loved. By the very nature of what he did, people wanted to share themselves, their lives, their intimate issues with him, and he became somebody that the nation could trust, and that's why he's so professionally respected, and in terms of being in the nation's living rooms, widely adored. So this is a real shock and a real distressing story as well. As you were rightly saying, he was only yards away, a 90-second walk. It was portrayed as the picture in the double page spread in our paper shows. He was 150 yards from an area, not just from safety, but from an area that had previously been searched by his 4 adult children. And that must make it even more distressing. Imagine if you are one of those, and the anguish you must be feeling that what might have been, what could have changed, what could you have done differently? It must be so difficult. Can I just recap for our viewers who might not have known the chronology? Went missing last Wednesday in an area around Peddy. There is footage of him showing walking through a mountainous path. Again, very helpful. Thank you. Showing the pictures there. And he's descending towards a wall, and then he vanishes out of sight. It's not clear if he sits down. All of this is happening in searing heat. And all of us have been on holiday to somewhere where there is extreme heat like that. You can all sort of put yourself in that position. He's an adventurer. He wanted to go out and about. He was last captured on camera near an area, again, close to Peddy. But the feeling is that he might have been attempting to reach the resort or maybe towards a sea in the hope of cooling off. As things stand now, it's all speculation, all very distressing speculation. But all we can start off by saying is that our thoughts are indeed with his wife, Claire, and his family.
Yeah, so it does seem that Dr. Mosley probably took a wrong turn and ended up struggling over this craggy mountain. And it's not just a case that you've been walking in 35 degrees C, you've been walking over rocks in 35 degrees C heat. And that's even more difficult than if you're just strolling up the road. He's collapsed or somehow come to grief just a few feet behind a wall where he was sort of out of sight, or out of immediate sight, it should be said, and also and a fence on the edge of a tourist complex. But also, this wasn't a place that he was expected to be, so it wasn't somewhere the search had focused up till now. It was his accommodation was in the other direction, and they were looking along the route from the beach to the accommodation, trying to find him along there, not thinking he might have gone pretty much entirely the opposite way. And the body was only found, and it's by complete fluke, it's worth saying, the local mayor was doing a TV interview in the area of that other resort, and got in a boat to leave, and looked back at the island from the sea and saw something odd, rang the guy at the bar and said, "Could you have a look behind that wall?" And he probably saw something, either Dr. Mosley, or he saw the purple umbrella he had with him, something like that. And they've gone and found him there finally. He does seem to have been dead for a few days. Now, Darren, one of the saddest things about all this is that I suppose Michael Mosley would probably have been the first to say, don't have a long, arduous climb in 33 seats. Don't do it without your phone. Don't do it straight after a swim when your brain is doing something a bit different. We've yet to hear the inquest, of course, and find out exactly what really happened. But it does seem at this stage that it would be what's referred to usually in this country as misadventure, as opposed to grim and serious happening.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm looking at our website as you were speaking there, and the interest in how this must have happened and what might have happened, and the theories that are being put forward as people try to make sense of it, because that's what happens in a moment like that. It is people trying to understand how somebody so who gives us and has been renowned for giving us such good advice and information could have maybe not followed his own. And as you were saying, I suspect it wasn't so much that he wasn't following his own advice. I think, as his wife was saying, he was an adventurer, and I think he started on a walk that he believed would be relatively simple, and encountered a difficult terrain, as you say, possibly took a wrong turn, and then it all descended from there.
And it's easy for people to do that, isn't it? I mean, during over half term, I was on a walking holiday with an 8-year-old and a dog, following routes and stuff. And you get it wrong sometimes. The farmers let brambles grow up over the gates and you can't get around there. You've got to find a way past to go the other way. And quite often, once you do go wrong, or you hit something like a patch of stinging nettles or brambles or hogweed or whatever it might be, you think, I'm going to go around that. I'm going to go around this. You do get worse. You go on and there's a field full of hogweed, but once you've started going, well, I can't go back. It was bad that way. I'm nearly there. We need to push on. And you have this attitude that you need to keep going, and that's easier and you're more likely to succeed than going backwards.
And add to that terrain was so rocky that one of the officers actually broke his leg on that terrain. But on top of all of that, as you say, you get into that state of confusion, and then you're all the while thinking about the searing heat and what you're going to do about it. And the one thing that I've been struck by watching the footage, looking at the pictures, is the umbrella he's carrying to protect himself from the beating down heat on him, and how difficult that must have been just to get your head straight while you're trying to get your bearings, and having to cope with that as well. What was he, 67 years of age? But I look at him all the time and I think he looks incredibly fit, but it must have been so difficult for him to navigate his way back to any kind of familiarity while having to deal with those conditions as well.
Exactly. Really difficult. And so what do you think, everybody? Have you got any happy sort of recollections or thoughts about Michael Mosley that you want to share with us? Do get into the comments and let us know. Dr. Mosley gave a lot of people excellent advice about their health for very many years. He was very trusted, and thinking of one or two TV doctors in recent times, naming no names, he does seem to be one of the better ones. And Lou says, sadly missed. Our thoughts, therefore, we have to say they go to his family, to his wife Claire, and their 4 children, who are now going to have the very difficult task of bringing their dad home. Right. We do need to move on to the main story of the day, which is a bit of an entirely different feeling of things. Now, so after having gone AWOL from the beaches of Normandy, the Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, is officially missing in action after this weekend. He is going to do a panorama interview tonight at 8 o'clock. But the whole of the weekend, he ditched a load of planned media interviews and appearances. Now, that's not just something that happens all the time. Darren, it's not what happens on a campaign trail either, is it? Because at this stage of the game, 3.5 weeks out from an election, they are desperate for any opportunity to get their message across. This is the week the manifestos are coming out. You would want to be in all the papers on Sunday and on Monday morning, Sunday in particular, because people go out and buy a paper. And, you know, really be able to speak to people. And he ditched the lot, didn't he?
He did indeed. I'm really trying hard, Susie, to think of a worse campaign than Rishi Sunak's campaign. I think in the moments from other campaigns,
it's making Ed Miliband look like a
bacon sandwich. Absolutely, he's. You know, I even think about the running.
If he had Ed Stone and ate a bacon sandwich at this stage, it would be amazing.
Take that absolutely all day and every day of the week. But I think as far as Sunak's concerned, he really has made a horse's backside of himself right from the very start, taking bad advice, going off, you would imagine, the reservation, because if he is getting a consistent slew of vignettes from someone telling him what to do, then that person needs sacking almost immediately. Last week, of course, he torpedoed the national service nonsense and embarrassed himself and offended the nation all in one fell swoop when he left that D-Day service early. Because even if he dares to mention that whole national service thing again, he's just going to unleash hell on himself. People are going to ask, why do you want kids to do that when you couldn't do it for a year?
My granddad was on those beaches and he was a conscript. He was a 32-year-old furniture salesman who did not want to be there. He did not sign up. He was ordered up and, well, along with thousands of others, thrown into the guns and thrown up the beaches after the guns had even finished firing. And Rishi Sunak just goes, oh, national service, you get so much out of it. Well, you're not going to get a prime minister paying any attention, it would appear.
Honestly, and I think what he has done in that moment, and I do just want to stop for a second and stay on this, because I've been on with you many times and I know that you are very close to a lot of vets. You've done a lot of work with vets, you've campaigned for vets as well. And although there is a humorous side to kind of sending Sunak up, or as he does it to himself, there is that hurt and that lack of appreciation, at the lack of appreciation for what they went through and what they sacrificed. I'm sure you can elaborate better than I can.
Yeah, well, you know, one of the big things has got to be Rishi Sunak, one of his first tasks as Prime Minister, agreed the medal for nuclear veterans that we'd campaigned for 5 years. And to be fair, Boris Johnson has sorted it out, but Rishi Sunak said, oh, look what I've done. It's the first thing you get when you got to office. He came to an event with a bunch of nuclear veterans who had been ignored for 70 years. He announced they'd got a nuclear test medal, and he stumbled in his speech when they sighed, because there was this amazing moment of relief that just rose up from them, that they'd been seen and recognised, thanked for the first time. A medal is really minor thing, but it mattered a huge amount. And he stumbled in his speech and went, oh, someone likes what I've done, and carried on. And he promised at that event to meet nuclear veterans and talk about the nuclear blood scandal and their missing medical records. And then he's refused 12 times to do it since then. It's been 18 months. I've sent stuff in to Downing Street every time I do a story, every time we get more evidence. Okay, please, we still want to see Rishi. They've written to him and it's just blank. And his team blank us and he blanks us. And the first time someone shows you who they are, you believe them. That is who he is as far as veterans are concerned. He will take the photo op, he will take the thing, and you'll go, oh, that's really nice. And then just, not nastily, not as a cynic, but just has no idea how much it matters to do something else. Mike says, the minister's being asked the weekend if Rishi Sunak will still be Prime Minister for the duration of the election campaign. If he did bail out before, what happens then? This is a whole other ball of rags, isn't it, really, Darren? Because you've got this situation now over the weekend. It's been disastrous. politically speaking. If you've got 100-year-old men in wheelchairs telling you you've let your country down, you're toast, right? But it's led quite seriously to suggestions, as Mike says here, that the Tories should change horse in the middle of the race. Sunak step aside for another leader. Kevin Maguire in the paper today is talking about Penny Mordaunt actually being on manoeuvres behind closed doors. And Suella Braverman is telling people they need to make friends with Nigel Farage. Other people saying there should be no deals at all with reform because his business. It's an extraordinary in a general election, Darren. 3.5 weeks left. Does Rishi Sunak have any time to turn this round? And could they actually replace him, with another leader at this stage?
Well, firstly, I don't think he has time to turn it round. I think his party's lost faith in him. The country's lost faith in him. The young people have lost faith in him. Veterans have lost faith in him. Everybody has lost faith in him. The problem, the concern is that you have this odious figure lurking in the background, trying to take the party even further to the right, coming out with the rhetoric that even some mainstream parties are feeling they have to adopt in order to fend off that odious character that is Farage. And for me, yes, there is a degree of levity around the collapse of Rishi Sunak, who himself was pretty mendacious in managing to maneuver himself into position in the first place. And yes, there is a degree of levity around Penny Mordaunt with her Margaret Thatcher style hairstyle and her ability, her attempt to appear exactly just got bigger as the show went on, as the debate went on last Friday.
Bridget, I felt Bridget in the first film after she'd been in Daniel Cleaver's soft tank. Sorry, go on.
I'm not an expert on hair, as you can see, but I think as far as the serious side to this is that this is a crucial election for the future of our country, for the future of our families, our kids, our unity as a country. And we have the concern of a reform party who are just desperate, salivating at the prospect of scaring people into feeling that we should be divided, that the people that we work and we play with and we acquaint with that are part of our families are there to undermine us in some way, shape or form. And this is a really, really crucial moment for all the problems that Sunak is suffering from. It is a moment for pause. Let's see Sunak being normalized, Farage being normalized in so many areas, and as he tries to come across as a really nice bloke, but he is poisonous, he is divisive, he is dangerous. And the failure of Sunak, you just hope that someone sane from within the Tory party can emerge to continue to keep the Tory party as it is, rather than allowing it to lurch to the right into the grasp of someone that will take us on a race to the bottom.
Yeah. Now, if anyone can hear a little bit of banging in the background, I've got builders in, and I think it's crowbars this morning. So that's partly why we had a fortnight off. The really noisy stuff was last week. So if you can hear that, sorry, hopefully it'll be intermittent. Alan says, morning, Alan. As an organisation that represents veterans, and Alan is the founder of Lab Rats, the Nuclear Veterans Campaign Group. The disrespect by the Prime Minister is unbelievable. This is not the first time. You must remember he's abandoned lots of veterans organisations. And in answer to Mike's question about whether or not it's possible, even how it might work, that you could change leader. I mean, the Conservative Party constitution, I think, says that they can just anoint someone new, as they did with Sunak, without a vote going to the grassroots, without it going to a vote of the party and hustings and all that kind of stuff. But they would need to agree. That's the fundamental problem with that one, Mike. Everyone in Parliament, all the MPs would have to agree and coalesce around someone, as they did Sunak. I don't think we're there. I really don't think we're there. You'd have to actually get them all in a room. I'll get them in such a way that you could, have a vote of some sort. And even if they could agree, I don't think that's possible. So it seems to be kind of.
What's your view, Susie? Do you think that they should stick with it, or do you think that they should maybe? I mean, you say you introduced me as fellow columnists, and our role is to have a position on these things. Certainly, I think if you change course now, you are literally waving the white flag. You are there is, first of all, there isn't anyone within the Tory party that is going to suddenly convince the nation that they are credible, that the party is credible, that they can do any worse or better than they have done over the past 14 years. And the second thing is, it sends its own message out if you throw him overboard. He's been saying, I'm not going to go off to California, I'm going to stay here, I'm committed to the country. As soon as
passport is by the front door, ready to go.
The bags are packed, the go bag is ready. He is off to California.
Yeah, no, of course she is.
So I just wanted to know what your view was.
Well, as Phil said, Penny Mordaunt's hair grew every time she lied. If Penny were to become leader, that's just not going to happen, because what people don't remember often about her is her brother is trans, and she's got some very woke views about trans rights, and the Tory membership do not share them. So she's just not going to become a leader with any kind of a vote. I think quite a few of the MPs are not going to back her either. Suella Braverman, bonkers. All right. No matter whether people agree with some of the views or not, you've got maybe Priti Patel or Tom Tugendhat who would be able to, people be able to sort of gather behind them. But I think they said when they ditched Boris, this is the action of a party that's desperate and is changing horse mid-race. They said when they changed out from Liz Truss to Rishi that it was really bad and they shouldn't do it. If they ditch Rishi now, it'd be even worse. But you'd end up going into an election with a manifesto that the leader hadn't signed off, and that no one knew them probably, or if they did, they didn't like them, and they'd be absolutely tainted. Absolutely untainted. There's no way. But I mean, Rishi is just fighting a losing battle. It's a bit like Ed Miliband. I remember on the day of the Ed Stone, the big tablet of stone in which Ed said, "Here are my promises. I've carved them in stone. They're not going anywhere." And everyone went, it looks like a grave, right? And they haven't thought it through at all. And went, oh my God, who's working on his comms? And from that moment on, he seemed to be just fighting a really losing battle, and it was sad to see. But the other side just got stronger and stronger. But and still no one suggested switching him out.
No,
3 weeks out. It's an extraordinary. It's an extraordinary example of just how far off away from reality the Conservative Party has been for a long time. That they thought Boris Johnson might help at this stage, that they thought Liz Truss might help at this stage, that they thought Brexit was actually a good idea, that they thought this kind of Brexit was a good idea, that they thought Rishi Sunak was going to be the numbers and details man, and not at any point go, well, he just has not been paying any attention to the details here, because you go to D-Day not for the photo opportunity, but because it matters. And if you don't think it matters, the thing is that it matters. It matters that you don't think it matters, and you don't know why it matters. But it's not just the photo opportunity. You go because it matters to people. And when you've got a resurgent far right across Europe and in our own country to some extent, I mean, Farage would say that they're not far right. They're only further right than the Conservatives because the Conservatives are so wet. But listening to some Conservative policies we've had recently, they're pretty right wing these days. Then you really need to go to D-Day. It matters a huge amount. Elaine says, I think reform will do Tories and Labour a lot of harm, and this is an important point that I want to talk about now. So we've got this disaster. We've got Sunak being talking about as though he should be dropped. And a lot of people are asking what comes next after the election. And as Lane points out here, you've got an inevitable defeat, and we've got European election results overnight that have come in, which show the far right has made gains across Europe, France, Germany, a few other places. They've held off in some places, but they've made some gains. I mean, the Chancellor Olaf Scholz's party came third behind Alternative for Deutschland, which is the far right job in Denmark. Germany, and they came first, So although you can argue that European is seen as a protest vote, as it was here to some extent, reform arguably to the right of the Tories, although Farage, its main shareholder, would tell you that it's not. Rishi's true legacy looks like it might be a more extreme opposition, whether it's the Conservatives, whether it's reform, whether it's a mishmash of the two, if your opposition is more extreme, the conversation of the government has to change to match it. So, you're not going to have a Labour Party that is more centrist, perhaps, or more left-wing even, because if the argument that's being made with them is, well, you're not right-wing enough, you're not racist enough, you're not doing this, you're spending too much money in the NHS, you're letting too many people in, all this kind of stuff, then their conversation has to move to defeat it, and then everything becomes a bit more right-wing, doesn't it? We've had that with Corbyn going the other way to some extent. Everything became a bit more left-wing.
Absolutely. And I think that's when the politics of division ramps up even further, because the likes of Farage, who is a very polished performer, he's a very polished media performer.
Good communicator.
He's a terrific communicator. And I use that word terrific. That's doing very heavy lifting, but he is. I watch him and I listen to him on the radio, and he knows what he's doing, and he knows where the camera is, and he knows who he's talking to. But the one saving grace might just be social media, because we can fact check these guys in real time. We can push back against the rhetoric. We can undermine and deconstruct some of the poisonous rhetoric that he is using to try to divide us, because what people want to do right now is pay their mortgages and just live their lives in peace. And I listen, all my life, ever since my parents came to this country in the 70s, I saw the National Front giving out leaflets and saying, if you want to live in fear, if you want a black man or black family living next door to you, vote for Labour. If you want this to happen to your families, and if you want to be unsafe, vote. And now I'm seeing the same rhetoric again 50 years later. That's when you strip it down, that's what we are dealing with Nigel Farage. And it's okay to say he's only talking about people on the boats. He's talking about me. He's talking about my children. He's talking about my family. He's talking about my friends. And that effectively, as you just pointed out, is what you are dealing with if he is the leader of the opposition, because we will have masquerading as legitimate political discourse, the kind of thing I'd see on leaflets from extreme far-right parties, the National Front in the 70s. Do we want that? We don't. And that's why it's so incumbent on Labour to have a clear, coherent plan to convince people that they are a way forward and to stick to their principles. It's all very well saying this is going to happen and that's going to happen. But I think that if Labour continued to be the party of the unions, of the minorities, of the people who are disenfranchised, of the people who don't have a voice, it's all very well to say, oh, well, these people don't have a voice. And that if Labour continues to stick to their principles, I think they can see off the threat of Farage. But as you rightly say, if he does become the leader of the opposition, if that is Sunak's legacy, then we are in for a really, really difficult few years to come.
Yeah, and I would just say also, I don't think he wants to be the leader of anything in Parliament. I think he wants to be an MP, and I think he wants to be able to influence, and he wants to disrupt. But give that man the keys to the kingdom, and you wouldn't know what to do with it. He's never known how to wield power. He just likes to cause a fuss. He's just the noisy man in the pub. And you actually, there's one of those people who go, well, I think he'd make a great prime minister. Right, okay. You want to send him off to meet Vladimir Putin. Do you know what he's going to say? No. Do you think it would be thought through? No. Do you think he'll follow the briefing from the civil service? No. Tricky, sticky wicket. And remember that the first job of any prime minister, when they go into Downing Street after all the clap, 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 oh, well done, and you go in, you're left on your own in a room to write the letters of last resort about whether or not you will order a nuclear strike in the event of an attack on the UK. Now, do you think Rishi Sunak thought about it before he wrote those letters? Do you think Liz Truss thought about it before she wrote those letters? Do you think Keir Starmer gave it more than a second's thought? What do you think Nigel Farage would do? Phil says, it will be deliciously ironic. The only tangible benefit of Brexit will end up being the annihilation of the Tory party. Perhaps, Phil, but if this, I've said this 1,000 times, if you annihilate a particular party, what comes in its wake?
like a hydra, isn't it?
It's a life hydra. Not just that, you know, a centrist Conservative Party, you may disagree with austerity and David Cameron is green crap or whatever, but that was not as harmful as what might come without them. And we've also got this sense now that when you have an insurgent party, which is of an extreme, that the centrist party that they are campaigning against effectively, because Farage is campaigning against the Conservatives, right? He's just trying to destroy the government. That party will inevitably move to the extreme to counter it.
Mm.
And perhaps it will. And it certainly has in the past few years, hasn't it? It's definitely become more right-wing.
Well, you know, just on the back of that, sorry to interrupt you, Susie, but I have to accept, I was a little bit dismayed to see Keir Starmer writing in a newspaper, one of our rival newspapers on the right, about immigration, because that, as you say, you have to adopt the language of the right. You're trying to appeal to the masses. You're trying to get votes. But what you don't want as a voter, as a black voter, is to see the person that who should be in a position to speak for you trying to court that vote. We want to stop immigration, particularly given 4 years ago on the campaign trail, he was saying we are ascribing the problems that of our country to the people who come into this country, and we've got to make the case for immigration. So you're then thinking, well, which is it? And just because, you know, we are traditionally a Labour paper, I'm a Labour voter, there's no hiding away from that. But it doesn't mean that we can't be critical friends. It doesn't mean that we can't pose those points. It doesn't mean that we can outline, as you were saying, the concern around adopting the language of the right to be able to try to get those votes to get into power. Because if you make that a thing, then you leave some people politically homeless. And that's not what you want to do. You want to be able to take people with you.
Yeah, that's when the extremes creep in. And that's one of the things that Rishi Sunak, of course, is letting down other people who don't vote Tory, but who would like the conversation to be between these two parties rather than like those two parties. Okay, it's really quite simple. That's part of the job of the Prime Minister is not to leave the reservation and just clear off and go missing in action. But it is still possible that when the Conservative Party is going to have to reinvent itself after this, that when it reinvents itself, that it may just look at itself over the past few years and go, we've tried being really right-wing. That didn't work. We now need to be more centrist, and maybe that will work. And eventually they would get to that point. They would have a new leader and reinvent themselves, and they would get to that point. How long it will take to get there, I don't know. But that's where you'd need to be for any sensible, sane party to have a shot at power in this country. And added to which is worth pointing out, Reform, of course, is not a political party. It is a business in which Nigel Farage is the main shareholder. And it has no democratic processes. He has not been elected as leader. He just decided to exercise shareholders' rights and kick the other guy out. They have got no policies for reform, particularly. I think I saw some costings at the weekend that said what the plans they did have was like 196 billion. There was no idea where the money's coming from. Obviously, they're going to close down the NHS now, pay for everything. But the good thing, I suppose, about them being slightly more, not credible, but slightly more being more important in the election is that some of their policies are going to start getting scrutinised a little bit harder. So we've got all that fun yet to come too. So. Right, moving on. Thank you for all that, Darren. We have managed to find some good news in the world, though. Here it is. Now we all like a bit of a bargain. Oh, it's a picture of Taylor Swift's knees. And from one 48-year-old woman from Exeter, a book spotted at a car boot sale with pretty hearts on the cover seemed to be just that. She snapped it up for £1. There's a picture of it there, and thought no more of it and didn't even read it until clearing out her loft many years later, a short while ago, and realising it was a 1953 first edition of Ian Fleming's first Bond book, Casino Royale. Now, she took it to an auctioneer to be valued, and it came back at a whacking £15,000. And it's up for sale at the end of the month. There's only like less than 5,000 in the initial print run, so it's very, very rare. On that basis, I should say, all my books are even rarer. Get a copy right now. So, Darren, is this proof that this Monday, of all Mondays perhaps, that there's nothing better than an old-fashioned, something you know, something you can rely on, bargain?
Well, absolutely. I mean, I've been, while you've been talking, looking through Google to see where my nearest car boot is, because I might go down there and have a look. She clearly bought that, not intending it to be for her eyes only. See what I did there?
Yeah.
She wanted to maybe just buy it for the sake of it, maybe family.
It was from 1953.
Exactly. But it's a terrific story, and I think it is so often the case that we have stuff kicking around at home that we think, I mean, if I pan this camera around the room from which I am broadcasting here, in the corner, I've got loads of boxes in storage, loads of books. I've got another bookcase over there. And I'm embarrassed to pan it around, actually, because you'd say, oh my gosh, look at the state of this place. But, within them, you never know, could be the book that, if I were to take it.
You could spend all day going through it down. Chances are there won't be anything in it whatsoever. I mean, I can look at my shelves. I've got bookshelves over here, okay, above my desk, above the camera, which are like the books that you gather as a journalist, because this is my desk. And when I left the working in the Mirror day to day, I brought my desk home. So I've got a diary from 1994. I've got a dictionary of biology, my McNay's Essential Laws for Journalists. I've got the entire back catalogue of Jim Davidson's autobiographies. I've got Katie Price's autobiography.
What are you doing with them?
I've got Katie Price, Heather Mills McCartney's autobiography. It's lots of books about nuclear weapons. If anybody who came to my house, they go, "What is this?" And there's no value to this whatsoever, apart from to me. If I think it was when Jim Davidson was on Celebrity Big Brother once, and I had to go and try and find some scandal from his past. I had to read them. And Prince Harry's book's up there too, full of post-it.
Okay.
It's just stupid stuff like that.
It would be interesting, like certainly for our viewers, what's the oldest book they might well have, and if you were to sort of dig it out and blow the cobwebs off, you think to yourself, I wonder if I could, retire to my quantum of solace if I were to sell this.
Yeah, no, I don't think so. I think some of my oldest books are probably my Tory Pratchett's from that, or my personal diaries from when I was in sixth form. I mean, come on, I got that. I don't know.
A whole different show, Susie.
I just didn't want to throw it away. I think it's got poetry in it. Anyway, thank you very much, Darren, for taking us through all that. Thank you, everyone, for taking part. We will be back again on Wednesday for another edition of the News Agenda. By that point, we will have seen the Prime Minister. He will have reappeared. Panorama tonight, 8:00, for a half-hour kind of interview, which you didn't have, it got to be said, with Liz Truss, or with Boris Johnson, who tended to hide in a fridge instead. So actually, to have a Prime Minister who is doing some of the traditional things that you do see on campaign trails, which is talking to journalists occasionally when he's not cancelling them and not disappearing from D-Day commemorations, that's to be welcomed. So that's something Rishi Sunak's doing differently. But on Wednesday morning, we'll be talking about all of that, I am sure, and some other stuff. So come back then. Until then, everybody, stay safe, take care. Tatty, bye.